Well, good morning, everybody. Long time no see. See, I'm gonna spare you like the obnoxiously long YouTuber intro of, oh, guys, I was so busy and gone. Nobody gives a fuck. And instead, let's go straight into it with this video. Because, yes, I have nothing better to do than to watch a 1.5 hour Jordan Peterson debate. Let's watch. I have no idea how I'm gonna edit and cut this, so get cozy and get ready for a 2 hour yapping session.
I'm Dr. Jordan Peterson. I'm a clinical psychologist, a professor emeritus at the University of Toronto, an author, a podcaster, public speaker.
Why is he mocking? Hi, I'm Jordan Peterson. Or is the light just like hella in his eyes and that's why he's doing it? Maybe, I don't know.
Today I'm surrounded by 25 atheists.
25? It was 20.
My first claim, atheists reject God, but they don't understand what they're rejecting.
Whoa, I stopped it. Guess what? I'm gonna yap. Well, okay, but like, will he present how he views God? Because like, I don't think nobody will truly understand God, not even the people that are religious. So like, the people who accept God don't, they see their own views of it, obviously, and that's totally fine. They see their own views of how they perceive God, and they understand their own perspective on God. But I don't think nobody will truly understand a God. So, you know what, Jordan?
Good
Michael
afternoon,
Jordan.
Dr. Peterson.
How are you doing?
So this claim here that atheists don't know what they're rejecting. My background is in studying to become a traditional Catholic priest, daily mass, daily rosary, going on long retreats, deep into the magisterium and biblical hermeneutics, like I was thoroughly in it. And it seems like I do know what I'm missing. Is there something that I missed over years of study, both this issue formally and living out religion so deeply?
Well, you obviously feel that you missed something when you were practicing for the priesthood. Your aim was off then. So
And
there's
so-
always the possibility that it's still off now.
What was off about my aim in the first place?
I don't know. That might take a long time to figure out. But
Then it seems kind of like this no true Scotsman type of fallacy in which you're the arbiter of people's aims and how they understand those aims to be. How is it that you can claim that people don't know something that you know about their life despite not having met them?
well, it's obviously a generic claim, just like the atheist claim that there's no God is
Yeah.
a generic claim. In your case, it would have to be specified more, and I'm not claiming to understand what was going on in your mind, but
Yeah.
my experience with atheists is twofold, is that they have a very reductive notion of what constitutes God, let's say in the Judeo-Christian tradition, and they've often
Jesus Christ, bro will be spamming buzzwords. What the fuck?
been hurt by someone who was religious or by the religious enterprise or perhaps by God himself, so to speak, and that's left
Yeah.
them with an animus.
But I think that you have a reductive view of what atheism is. You've defined religion so broadly to include any sort of having aim in life, any sort of cultural archetypes, or having a metaphorical substrate. And atheism to you is a very specific type of like three people in the world that are these Raskolnikov type of, they want to get away with a perfect murder. It seems like you have the reductive view of what an atheist is.
See, okay. Wow. He stopped the video. Crazy. Jubilee will still claim the fuck out of this video, so it doesn't matter. But like, my problem with this is like nobody's defining their terms. Like, atheists don't understand what they're rejecting. What does that mean? Maybe maybe they just don't want to go to church every Sunday. Maybe that's what they're rejecting. And I think like that's a fair thing to and simple thing to understand. Just very, very obscure and abstract premises here from Mr. Dr. Jordan Peterson.
Well, let's start with your claim. How do you define the God that you're rejecting? Like, what is God to you? You studied in the church, you found that unsatisfactory. How would you characterize what you rejected?
I think the average Christian believer, when they say that they're Christian and they believe, they mean some sort of God that is all-powerful, all-perfect, is somehow involved in the matters of this world, and that we look to them through wisdom and with the Logos incarnate in Christ. And it also seems like you don't believe in religion in the way that the average Christian says that they believe in religion. And there are as many gods out there as there are believers, because everybody has mutually exclusive and different views of what God is. So it seems
Well,
like...
if everybody had mutually exclusive views of what God is, no one could speak to each other. You're
My biggest problem with Jordan Peterson's arguing is that he doesn't argue the premise, but rather he grabs how you speak and tries, but he rather grabs your words and tries to, but what do you mean by that word? How about we try and see the whole picture? Like, he is very generously seeing your entire very ambiguous statement, and you try and understand his ambiguous statements so you can meet a common ground. Because you can reach a common ground. Jordan will just, what do you mean by God? How, if you say all people have their different exclusive views of God, how would they talking to each other? Well, he probably means that, Muslim philosophy about God will be slightly different and excluding some views from, the Christian one. That's what he means. Jesus, cut the guy some slack. Like, he obviously doesn't mean everyone, or maybe he does.
Let me give you an example. For example, there's a sub-narrative in the story of Moses where Moses is rewarded with a glimpse of God. Okay, and that's one of the ways that God is characterized in the Old Testament stories.
Yes.
Now, Moses is a faithful servant of God and a good man. At least that's the case within the confines of the story.
One possible interpretation.
It's the case within the confines of the story, obviously.
Obviously. When we look at the Bible can't precisely say anything because there are so many different exegetical and hermeneutic views of this particular book, and that everybody has everybody has disagreed historically on, it seems like, even the most benign detail about a book this big. And it seems like you can only say that the Bible says something if you first presuppose that it's univocal.
So your claim essentially is that Moses in the Old Testament plays the role of a villain or is irrelevant.
Whoa! Can we keep the premise? When Dr. Mike was on here, I was dogging on the people who are talking Dr. Mike. But why cannot Jordan Peterson keep himself on his own premise? The hell?
Because the alternative claim is that he's good.
No, because we can't talk to those authors.
If you are going to start with the presupposition that there's nothing I can say about any of these stories that you're not going to disagree with from the perspective that there are multiple potential competing claims, then I can't speak with you. So
and we also have a short time here, so I want to get to the core of what you're arguing here, and I'd love if we could.
The core of what I'm arguing is that atheists reject God, but they don't understand what they're rejecting. So I'm trying to give you an example of what's being rejected and its complexity. Okay, so God rewards Moses with a glimpse of the divine. So this is a definition of the God that atheists are hypothetically rejecting.
That claim doesn't make any sense. Because if I understand God or religion or whatever the fuck, if I understand any kind of theistic philosophy in my understanding, I'm rejecting it based on that understanding. So you're not questioning my logic of why I'm rejecting it, but even if I understand it from my own perspective, which is a stupid point to argue. Because what if my entire view of religion or God or whatever the fuck was, I see a giant spaghetti monster and I'm like, I don't fuck with that. That's my understanding. You cannot question that because that's just what I'm stating it is. And I'm rejecting the notion that I believe that there's a giant spaghetti monster. So, I have to agree with the guy with the cap on. No cap though. Because who is Jordan Peterson to say, well, you don't understand what you're rejecting? How does...
Possible one.
I said I didn't say the rejecting.
Oh, Jesus.
A possible one.
I said I didn't say
Whoa.
the glimpse of the divine. So this is a definition of the God that atheists are hypothetically rejecting.
A possible one.
I said I didn't say the.
Jordan Peterson. Somebody put him on ad-libs for every single rapper ever. I have a gun. Jordan Peterson. O-Block's #1 fucking ad-libber.
I said
Oh my God.
That is possible.
Oh my God, he's Megan Thee Stallion. I said classy. Bougie. What's happening?
Okay. So despite the fact that Moses is a stellar character and he's had a long and difficult life and can withstand a lot of difficulty and travail, God puts him between two cliffs. So he can just see a crack of what's in front of him. And when God walks by, he allows him to see his back. Okay, so the implication of that story is that the divine is fundamentally unknowable. It's a pinnacle experience, and that people in their finitude have to be shielded from a comprehensive vision of the basis of reality. Well, it's the same claim, for example, that you're a finite creature and that you face something that in the final analysis is unknowable, and that you have to establish a relationship with it regardless of your inability to perceive or even withstand perceiving the whole. Okay, is there a problem with that?
I mean, the problem is that when we look at, famously, when you've been asked, do you believe in God, the question becomes, what do we mean by God? And in the Bible, it's not even clear if the biblical authors know what God is, because Yahweh has historically emerged from an early storm god, a deity that doesn't exhaust the category of deity, and that has changed over the Old Testament. Does God have physicality? Does God not have physicality? It seems like, yes, if you define religion to mean anybody that has an aim, anybody that looks at the unknown, anybody who wants to go from chaos to order is inherently religious, then yes. But also in the same way, I could define atheist as somebody who doesn't dogmatically believe in a religion, or somebody who doesn't regularly attend religious services or belong to a denomination. To help especially the audience kind of like boil this down, there was a lot of words there. That the central claim is that we exist somewhere between the finite and the infinite.
A central claim.
A central claim is that we exist somewhere between the finite and the infinite?
No, I said that we were finite and we had to establish a relationship with the infinite.
Why do you say we have to? That's okay. Like, why? You know what? I would never argue with anybody the same way that Jordan Peterson is, because it feels reductive to or debate for the sake of debating and disproving each other while we sort of understand each other. But do the same to him. Like, you know what?
Yeah, then in that case, then we're all religious, but then I can do the same thing and define one particular element of atheism. It seems like we both have a reductive view of what the other side looks like, to the point where a conversation seems incoherent, and not just incoherent, but not in the way that the average Christian understands Christianity to be.
Do you?
Okay, first of all, my guy with the no cap, fix your posture. I'm not the one to speak, but like, Jesus. But I was going to say that my guy with the cap, he's speaking facts. He's got no cap on for real. I'm going to kill myself. But, wow. He just said the exact same thing I said. It's like I'm there.
Hey, how's it going? Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you,
David.
David, good to see you.
Tell me everything that you know about the Polynesian deity Lono.
Oh, shit. I was going to talk about that. Like, that's a very... Jordan Peterson is arguing from a very Christianity-centric point of view, and kind of discounting all the other thousands or millions of religions.
Lono.
I don't know anything about the Polynesian deity Lono.
So you're rejecting something without knowledge of what you're rejecting.
Well, no, that's a very stupid gotcha, because he never said he's rejecting it. He just said he doesn't know it. So that's a very stupid gotcha, because it doesn't work.
I'm not rejecting it.
Oh my god, like I'm there. Like, put me on a spot with him. Put me in a 1v1, not a boxing fight, because I think Jordan might have a good fucking chance at knocking me the fuck out. But like, you're dumb. If you actually thought it's gonna work, you're dumb. You're talking to Mr. Dictionary over there, and you thought a simple gotcha like that will work? Oh my god.
No more than I'm rejecting.
Do you believe in
anything
Lono?
that I don't know anything about.
Do you believe in Lono? Do you believe that he is a deity that exists in the world, exists in the universe, that exists in the existence of everything? Do you believe that Lono
I'll
is
answer
a
that
being?
question once you answer my question, which is, do I reject everything that I'm ignorant of? Because that's your presupposition that undergirds your argument, and unless you can prove that that's valid, then there's no point.
My question is quite simple.
Yeah, but that doesn't
Do
mean
you
it's
believe-
formulated accurately.
Do you believe that Lono exists? Yes or no?
You're trying to force him into a corner, which, first of all, I guess props to you for trying. But like, he can simply say, "I don't want to reject because I don't understand," to get out of like. Jordan Peterson might be a fucking douchebag, but he isn't fucking stupid.
We have someone over here who studied it in their own way. I've studied religion. I have a degree in religious studies, specialty in Christianity and Mediterranean traditions.
Shit,
and
I have
further
Muslim
than
friends
that,
too.
beyond me.
Okay.
Aha!
Hi, nice to meet you.
How are you doing?
Good, how
What's
are you?
your name?
I'm Greg. Nice to meet
Hi,
you.
Greg.
You know what? Props to Jordan Peterson, because I feel like, and props to all of them. Maybe it will change later on in the video, but like I feel it's very easy to get cynical and like start being mean and start being rude to somebody. Like, oh, fuck off. But I appreciate this, saying hi, good morning, how are you, all that shit.
Okay, so I feel like you're getting at this idea of polysemy. I would say I reject the concept of God in this very literal way. But
What literal way?
the way that God is this omniscient, omnipotent, agentic, supernatural being that sent his son down and has, caused miracles and all these things like that. The idea of God is
Do you
like,
think that there's an underlying unity of things?
could you explain that question?
Well, scientists, for example, believe that science unifies in a comprehensive theory. Do you, yes, no, or that there are multiple competing truths? Those are the options. Either things unify or there are multiple competing truths.
I know that, for example, like in physics, people are looking for like a theory of everything.
And why do you think they're doing that?
It's interesting, it's helpful.
But they also believe that there's an underlying unity to things.
In a sense, yeah, like like the material world and time and space are probably governed by universal laws and principles.
Partly that, yes, yes, but that the same thing might extend to a broader domain that would include imagination and value.
Could you help me connect that to the prompt?
Well, I'm trying to define God, the God that I don't think atheists do a very good job of defining. Here's
Okay, but that's your definition. And you cannot blame someone else's understanding, or you cannot reject someone else's understanding simply because they agree with their own definition and not your definition. Low-key, the first guy, they put the best soldier at the front, and now the Est is like cannon fodder. Motherfuckers fucked
another
up.
question for you. What do you think guides you in your determination of whether or not what you're saying to me is true?
Can we go back? Can we stay on what we were talking about?
We are.
Okay.
You're just uncomfortable with the question.
No, I feel
That's very offensive, not offensive, but like judgmental. Maybe he, I don't know.
like you're just kind of throwing different spaghetti at the wall.
I'm not.
Okay.
I asked
All
you a
right.
very specific question. What is it that you think guides you when you're talking to me to help you determine whether what you say is true?
Logic, memory, reasoning, sensory information.
How do you distinguish that from being governed by something that's false?
An interesting question.
How do you know the difference when you speak between what's true and what's false? So you could imagine
Infer, right? I can infer. I can.
from what principles?
Well, okay, that's just once again. What was that? Like the something devil conspiracy or whatever the fuck. Alex O'Connor talked about this. Like, what if everything you believe is false? Like this is like analogous to like last Thursdayism. It's kind of a logically sound principle, but it doesn't move you anywhere in practice. Like I could say, everything that ever happened to you, or the entire world, happened last Thursday. And you say, oh, well, I believe things didn't. I remember stuff before last Thursday. And I say, no, last Thursday was just when the memories got implanted into you. The reasoning is sound, but it doesn't move us forward in anything. So I find debates like this very fucking pointless. Next question. I just fingered my keyboard.
My next claim is that morality and purpose cannot be found within science.
Well, sure. It's a very personal thing, so I don't think... Okay, well, if I was Jordan Peterson here, I would say, how do you define science? The study of things? Well, if you ask 1 million people what their purpose is, that's kind of a science. You're getting a linguistic definition of purpose and how the people define it. That's kind of a science. But, okay, for the most going of purely vibes of his claim, I kind of agree. Yeah, you have to. That's a very individual, soul-searching things. But I'm curious about what they will say.
What's up, Mr. Canada?
How you doing, man?
I'm doing great.
What's
How are
your
you?
name?
Brian. I think it's interesting that you say that morality and purpose can't be found in science. Actually,
No, within science.
sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Purpose, I actually grant you. Morality is actually something that we do see. We actually have examples of Neanderthals, an older individual was found in a tribe, missing an arm, missing teeth, still alive somehow in his 40s, 50s, right? Typically, you're a Neanderthal, you can't eat, you can't hunt, you die. right? But we know that members of his tribe were taking care of him, right? So we know that at some level, early in our evolutionary history, we actually developed altruism. We have examples of chimpanzees who actually have a basic understanding of fairness, right? If you give a chimpanzee 2 grapes, right, and his buddy gets 3, right? He actually freaks out, right? But you give both chimps 3 grapes and they're good. We have examples of parrots.
Except for the greedy chimps.
Except for the greedy chimps.
They want 4 grapes.
They want 4 grapes. You know, those do exist, right? But we have similar examples where we do animal tests, right? And
so morality is intrinsic.
I think.
So it precedes science.
I think that actually
right?
a better way to define it would be that social animals, which we are, right,
Yeah.
require some level of morality or.
Into what? I'm not disagreeing.
Sure.
Why do they require that?
Because it's the only way that social groups can actually survive, right?
That's my point with
Sure.
regards to science. Thank you very much.
Is that.
Precisely the point that you just made, that science has to exist within a moral framework that isn't in itself scientific.
How's that not scientific?
Well, because it's not derived from the scientific process, as you just
It
indicated.
doesn't need
by
to derive from
pointing
the
to-
scientific process.
Well,
It's
hang
the
on,
fact that
hang on a sec.
we are social animals, and we need that to exist as a group.
I
right?
agree, but
Sure.
you, to the morality of chimpanzees, they didn't derive that from science.
They don't need to. That's not how
That's
that
my
works.
point.
Science.
Oh my god, yeah. Okay, Jordan Peterson is low-key cooking your ass right now because Jordan is right. Oh my god, cancel me. No, but he is right. You can use science to study how morality is presented, but there wasn't one chimpanzee scientist who went like, gentlemen, let us all share grapes so we can function better society. No, it was an intrinsically given value. Now you can be like, it was, the point you could argue here was like, it was given genetically to like further off, you know, the whole colony, like kind of ants, so like they all share to make sure that the entire colony prospers. But that's still not, I guess, invented by science. It can be found and explored scientifically, but it's not invented, I guess. Skibbity toiletries, when the Gyat Sigma Ohio, the Caste and that Phantom tax. Capiche?
Thank you, man.
Good man. Yeah.
Capiche? The lineup.
Hey, Jordan Peterson. How you
How
doing?
you doing, man?
My name's Luke. Nice to meet
Good
you.
to see you, Luke.
So your claim that morality and purpose can only be found in science is a little shaky because I think that your claim is really being framed to be morality and purpose can only be found in religion. Is that how you're kind of framing it?
I would say that the domain of religion is the domain of morality and purpose. Yes, exactly.
Okay, but then how do you define? Okay, I think I don't disagree with. Okay, I'm gonna be like Jordan Peterson. I disagree with that because religion has to have a devoted thought towards a deity, while theistic logics or just theories of something don't have to do that. So I don't know why you would use the word religion here and not just some kind of philosophy or something. But okay, Peterson.
And also that science is actually structured, at least in part technically, to eliminate such considerations from its purview a priori.
Okay.
Right? That's why we define science as value-free. But that has to be wrong because scientists have to prioritize their attention towards something before they can even engage in observation.
Okay.
And that act of prioritization of attention is a value-predicated act.
Yeah, but that's a fault within humans and not within science itself. That's like blaming. If you have a kid that's bad at math and he does 2 + 2 is 5, and you blame math for it. No, that the kid is just stupid. That's not the fault within the math itself. That's the kid's fault.
And so I can continue. There's all sorts of things we have to assume about science before it can take place.
Okay, so what I'm specifically pointing out here is about religion in particular, since you yourself are a Christian, right?
People debate about that, and I generally don't discuss it publicly.
Okay, I understand that. And me, myself, I am a former young earth creationist fundamentalist.
Oh, yeah.
So I have experience in this. I used to run a TikTok channel directed about apologetics about the Bible, specifically in this type of facet with morality, evolution and such, and going back and forth with that. So in the Bible, it talks a lot about slavery, right?
Yes.
Yes. So in that, it teaches you how to take care of a slave. Rather than saying slavery is wrong, I think
Now,
it
it
should
says
say
that in the story of Moses.
It says slavery is incorrect. It says
Well,
it's immoral.
that's why Moses leads his people away from slavery.
The Bible sometimes has contradictory statements, believe it or not. And he's gonna go and maybe implied contradictory statements, but there was something about how to beat a slave that doesn't die, so it implies you owning slaves. Now, of course, we could, reinterpret it, but I feel like their reinterpretation is giving stuff too much credit. But I digress.
But why does the Bible predicate and tell people exactly how to take care of a slave? Isn't that immoral? Wouldn't you say that culturally we've evolved as a species, as he said earlier about empathy?
Yeah, I would say that the reason we evolved, so to speak, away from slavery was because the West was founded on Judeo-Christian morality and the presumption that every person was made in the image of God. And so slavery itself became immoral, and that was established by Protestant Christians in the UK, who then convinced the UK government for 200 years to go to war on slavery.
And wouldn't you say that this is about the cultural evolution of humans in general, rather than just Christianity?
No, I think it's the flowering of the ideas that were embedded in the biblical text. So
I mean, that's kind of, I don't know about that. I wouldn't put religion here. I would put power and economy of why slaves were a thing. Like, imagine you have free workers. The people in power will do anything to keep that. The voting systems or religious proofs to why. There was an very old text I read about. Wait. Hold on, I'm finna find this shit, gang. Alright, I won't find that example, but here's a different one. Like, religion is often used to encourage slavery or encourage position of power and to keep you, I guess, obedient to the higher power. That's what I believe. Or not to higher power, but the people at the top, it's very easy to use, oh, you will burn in hell forever if you don't do with these commandments. Now, I'm not saying that religion is bad. I think there's some amazingly good stuff. But for example, the caste system happened because there was an invasion of like the entire region. Let me Google that to make sure I'm right. So, to clarify, I believe that the entire caste system started in this way, that when the Proto-Aryans like set up trading towns and stuff like that, they talked about, what's it called, like different castes and stuff like that. Then they used the religious scripture from like Purushuta Sukta or whatever the fuck it was called, sorry if I butchered that name, to establish the caste system even harder, and then they left, but the caste system remained. I don't know if that's true, because this is not my area of expertise. So if I'm wrong, fucking correct me. That's cool. Alright, let's go back to where the fuck we were arguing about.
Dr. Peterson?
good to see you, man.
Pleasure.
What's your name?
Brian. So the first thing I would like to say is I would like to engage in this discussion in a symbiotic manner. I would not like to engage where there is one clear winner and one clear loser. Emotions are activated and it ultimately comes about ego. So I'm just saying I'm really trying to understand your position, and I would just like you to really try to understand my position.
Deal.
Okay, sounds good. With that, if you're saying that morality and purpose cannot come from science, is the opposite of that true, that morality and purpose can only come from God?
That implies that the opposite of science is God, which I wouldn't think it is. But
that's a way of defining it, yes.
Okay.
That's right, that's good. So I would say that with regard to the first claim, say, atheists don't understand what they're rejecting. Because I would say, by definition, God is the unity upon which moral claims are based. That's
Okay.
By definition of God, he is the unification of what moral...
God is the unity upon which moral claims are based.
Is that if that is your only definition of God, then you're disagreeing with the defining factors of what makes God in the Quran, the Torah, the Bible. They go into a lot more detail, or implied detail at least, of what makes God God. And I'm pretty sure none of them state that or reduce it to what your point is. So that's just your perspective of how you choose to view God, which is fine. But don't be atting other people for saying that they, or having different understanding of what God is. That's stupid.
That's
Okay.
a definition, right?
Okay, if there is a God, what is the purpose of life?
Well, in the Christian tradition, the purpose of life is to engage in
Yeah, but I don't know. I don't like that Jordan's bringing up the Christian tradition while previously not acknowledging the Christian definition of God. That's like me saying, "Oh, I only cook Italian recipes. Here is Korean kimchi." Like, what does that have to do with anything?
Well, in the Christian tradition, the purpose of life is to engage in voluntary, upward, self-sacrifice, so that the kingdom of heaven can be established on earth.
So you're trying to make it to heaven and avoid hell.
Yes, that's a good way of thinking about it.
What is the purpose of heaven? Do you understand? Well, so here's the deal.
At minimum,
it's
the opposite of endless suffering. How about that?
And so should we not try to achieve infinite suffering on planet Earth? And if we can't,
okay, if I was Jordan here, I would say, how do you define endless suffering? How do you define endless? How do you define suffering? How do you measure suffering? How do you not know that endless suffering? How do you not know that robbing someone of the experience of suffering endlessly is not making them suffer? You know, all of this type of arguing that I'm imitating Jordan doing is very paradoxical and, in my opinion, stupid. But the show must go on, so let's continue.
And achieve infinite suffering on planet Earth without God. Avoiding it. If we can do that without God, then does that defeat your claim?
Well, yeah, except that it doesn't. You circumvented my initial definition, because I said that by definition, God was the unified source of morality. And so if we...
But then, if that's your definition, then you're not agreeing with the Christian definition of what God is. So, like,
engage in moral exercise.
And when you're talking about morality, though, when you really reverse engineer it and you get it down to its root, you're a psychologist. Yeah. It really seems like it just has to deal with motivation. People are saying there is a God.
It's more specific than that.
Well, so let me ask you this. So if there is a God and there is a moral code and it doesn't come at your benefit, are you going to follow it?
It depends on how you define your benefit.
Oh my God. How do you argue with that? Because that's a very contrarian statement, or not contrarian, it's just a very contrarian philosophy of like checking your definitions always and then finding contradictions within your definitions. And I'm sorry, but nobody is smart enough to make every one of their statements fully, absolved of contradictions, especially when they also have to list the definition inside of each word. You're about to fuck up. You have to rely on like common vibes of what you're arguing about to like get to the point and seek mutual understanding.
If it's going to come at your expense, would you still follow it? If God came down and said, here is my moral code and you should follow it, but even if you follow it, you are still going to end up in hell, are you going to follow it?
Well, that was the question that was put to Job and to Christ, right? Because they were required. Hang on, I'm answering your question. They were required to withstand trials that would break anyone and maintain their upward orientation regardless.
And they did that with the motivation of believing that this omnipotent, all-loving God would somehow turn it into a benefit. So they still did it solely for their benefit. So
let's define. Hang on. Let's define benefit. Like,
this is how Jordan Peterson is arguing. An ambivalent, stupid statement. Your turn. You say something. What do you mean by that? I have no idea what you mean. He had me fucking tapped in like Naruto. Oh my God.
If I did something for your sister, would that be to your benefit? Like, how are you defining your benefit? Do you mean one of your whims gratified now? Or do you mean you and everyone you love and know over some reasonable span of time? Like,
so
what do you mean by
when you're talking about whims, I think you're talking about something that's more dopamine. When you're talking about morality, you're talking about something that's more serotonin and more ultimately satisfying. So you and I agree on a lot. I mean, when it comes to talking about how men should be masculine and things of that nature.
Where are we going with this? How are we cooking? Because we're grabbing all the spices, but nothing is going in the bowl. No food is being cooked.
How you doing?
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
I guess since you said morality and purpose cannot be found in science, it would just depend on like what you're referencing. If you're saying a description of your psychological preferences would be considered within science, sure. But I don't think that you have to say that it comes from science in order to be like an atheist. As an agnostic atheist, I don't know if God exists and I don't believe that a God exists. And the only ones that I would really reject would be like the all-knowing, all-powerful, all-good, perfect notion of God that plenty of Christians like prescribe themselves. So I guess
how is that relevant to this claim?
You're
Jordan, not much will be relevant to you because you go into and you ask, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by this? What do you mean by that? What do I mean? At this point, Jordan, just go and ask yourself, what do you mean? Because it's in your very logically non-valuable statements, they still don't mean shit. That's like, what's it called? A tautology. Is that what it's called? A tautology? Totality? That's like when it's saying, it gets here when it gets here. Yeah, that's true, but it tells you nothing. That's what I feel like most of Jordan Peterson's statements are. True, but pointless.
basing a position of morality and purpose in some like notion of God that isn't the same type of notion of God that typical Christians would prescribe. Your notion of God is
what typical Christians?
Okay, you cuck, Jordan. You said typical. Oh my God! Somebody, you need to duplicate Jordan Peterson, clone him, and make them to argue. They're just gonna ask, "What do you mean? What do you mean? What do you mean?" This guy said typical Christians, and you calling him out on it. But when you said typical atheists, when you were talking about your first point, nobody gave you shit. So like, please, fucking, I beg you, give some context or like just be more giving or understanding when you be talking to people.
About Cardinal Newman, who defined God as conscience. He's a major influence on all of Catholic social theory. How about that, Christian?
Sure. So do you believe in the all-knowing, all-powerful, all-good notion of God?
What do you mean by believe?
Do you think it to be true?
That's the circular definition. What do you mean when you say you believe?
How is that circular?
Because you added no content to the answer by substituting the word true and believe.
I said you think it to be true.
All right. So if you believe something, you stake your life on it.
What do you mean by that?
What? Yeah, that's a jump.
That's what I mean by that. It isn't something that you say. It isn't something that's associated with logical consistency. It's not declarative. It's not propositional. It's not a figment of your imagination.
Okay, well then, if you find something to be true and it doesn't have to be logically consistent or logically proven, or even have anything to do with logic, then your first three statements would be like, I don't follow your logic and I don't need to. And there is like, ignorance is bliss, I guess, because you can, according to Jordan Peterson, you can just refute logic if you believe something is true. How do you believe? By believing.
It's the presupposition of your attention and your action. And you're either fragmented, in which case you worship multiple gods, or there's some unity at the bottom of it that makes you an unstoppable force.
Okay, so you're saying that you don't believe something if you wouldn't die for it?
Not really, no.
Okay. So then,
how would you define belief? Something you say?
Well, can I explain? Like,
if I think scrambled eggs are pretty fucking nice, I'm not gonna fight you if you say no, they're not.
I could believe it is the case that this pen exists, but if someone like threatened my life, right, I would lie in order to be able to save my life, right? Like I think you would do that too. You wouldn't lie to save your life?
Don't be so sure.
You wouldn't lie to save your life?
How much do you know about me? I didn't lie to save my career. I didn't lie to save my clinical practice.
Would you lie to like save your children, your mom, your dad?
I don't think lying would save them.
No, can there ever be a circumstance logically that lying could save someone's life?
Yeah, and if you're steeped in sin, you're likely to live in circumstances like that.
I'll give you.
Why does you? Okay, side tangent. Have you ever seen like those pastors of mega churches? He talks like them. Side rant. Man asked about his private jet. Oh my God, I can't spell for shit.
You said that you don't like to fly commercial because you don't want to get into a tube with a bunch of demons. Do you really believe that human beings are demons?
No, I do not. And don't you ever say I did.
There's the same vibe of like Jordan Peterson.
We wrestle not with flesh and blood, but principalities and power.
Is it not the same vibe
I
right
think
here?
lying would save them.
Can there ever be a circumstance logically that lying could save someone?
Yeah, and if you're steeped in sin, you're likely to live in circumstances like that.
Am I wrong for thinking that this guy is the same as that? Oh yeah.
I'll give you an example. If you're like in like Nazi Germany, and it is the case that there's like Jewish people in your attic and you're trying to protect them, would you lie to like the Nazis?
I would have done everything I bloody well could, so I wouldn't be in that situation to begin with. It's a hypothetical, and it's not.
Jordan Peterson is the least respectful debater. Not like in the way that what's called he's mean to you, but that you will give him your benefits. As in, the benefit of the doubt, like, you don't know, you answer his question to the best of ability, you try and assume the best case scenario for all of his points, and you try and, like, not question his definitions, but go off general vibes, you know? But he won't do the same to you. If you ask him a question, he will be like, no, hypothetical, I don't care. Yeah, but most of the things that your points were also hypothetical, as in, they're not found, you cannot prove them, there are no objective truths to this. It's all a mind palace example, you know, you have to imagine and put yourself in, like, you have to reason your way forward to them. They're all hypothetical still. But people are answering because they want to further the discussion. You just refuse to answer, and that just kind of cuts the discussion. Or debate. Or in this case, argument.
Hypotheticals?
No, I can't answer a hypothetical like that because
Did
it's
you eat
far.
today?
Look,
Did you
don't
eat today?
play games.
I'm not playing games. I'm just
Yes,
asking if
you
you ate
are.
it today.
If you present me with an intractable moral choice that's stripped of context and you back me into a corner, you're playing game. I just told you I would do everything that I could to make sure that I'm never in that situation.
Yeah, but you already said you already are. The hypothetical question begins in the fact that you are in that situation. What do you do from there? That's the context. The context is not Germany, you are there. Oh my god, kill yourself. No, don't. I have to appease YouTube because they're being mean to me.
By the time you've got there, you've made so many mistakes that there's nothing you can do that isn't a sin.
By the time you've got there, what if you're born there?
Being born in Nazi Germany and trying to protect people that you care about. Like, there could be a Jewish friend that you have, and you want to protect them.
I think you should
have
just
them in
give
your
up on
attic.
that line of questioning.
Give up. The basic with Christian.
That
See me.
Yeah, nice to meet you. Everybody worships something, including atheists, even though they might not know it.
If nobody asks what he means by worship, I'll be very disappointed.
Hi.
Good work.
Thank you.
Hi there.
I'm Zena. So I want to start off with like defining terms.
Yes!
How do you define worship?
Prioritize.
Prioritize. So
Not the same thing. Not close to the same thing. If I have two work assignments and I prioritize one thing over the other because the deadline is shorter here, am I worshipping it? No. Okay, prioritize on what scale then? On just fucking hell.
So almost like having a preference over something rather than the other.
It's a hierarchy of preferences.
Yeah.
And you use it to direct your attention.
Right.
So whatever you
Okay, then by just biological truth, people will prioritize their own life or their offspring. Do they worship their offspring? Sure. You know what? In that case, if it's just a hierarchy of preference, as in you will prioritize breathing, then sure, you worship breathing. But is that really the word we're trying to use? Yeah, you worship breathing because you're prioritizing breathing. You're breathing before you do anything else. Really? God damn it.
you're attending to, you're worshiping.
Right. So I've kind of become a little bit familiar with your idea of like this value-laden hierarchy,
Yeah.
right? And you kind of posit that at the bottom of this hierarchy, or you could call it top or bottom, I
Yeah,
suppose.
right.
At the bottom of this hierarchy, this foundational priority in your life is going to be considered God.
That's
Is that
right.
correct?
Yes.
Right. I'm trying to imagine a situation in which could there be that someone has a priority at their foundation that is different from someone else's?
Oh, definitely.
Right. So we can have different conceptions of God.
That's why we fight.
Right. So essentially, there's not one God, but there are multiple gods, and these gods exist. And
Okay, sorry to cut you off, Queen, but how I would have questioned it, or how I would have phrased it is like, everybody worships something, you worship a god, if I am worshiping something, or it's highest or the top or bottom of my worship prioritization hierarchy, does it have to be a bigger than life feature or divine or some kind of divine figure? Or can I just be worshipping potatoes as my number one thing? If I'm, by his account, willing to die for potatoes, am I worshipping them? Sure, I am. So my question would be like, is God or something bigger than life always the highest priority? That's what I'm curious about.
some realm of truth. It's true that this person has one God and it exists.
Yeah, probably better to think about it as multiple values, but that there's a hierarchy of values with something at the bottom.
Right, but at the bottom is God, and
That's a definition, yeah.
Yeah, so at the bottom is God,
Yeah.
and there can be multiple people with different conceptions of God, and they're each valid in being called God. So there are multiple gods that exist.
It depends on what you mean by valid. So far, so good, but it depends on what you mean by valid, because I would say that some foundational conceptions don't play out when they're implemented. So if you put the wrong thing at the foundation, you end up in hell, for example.
That's just a completely new notion. What? Now you just presuppose that hell exists, which sure, from your logic, from your belief, might be true, but you don't have any tangible evidence for that. And if you would choose to believe it, sure, but why would you define someone else's order based off your belief?
That's what happens in totalitarian states.
Okay.
Or maybe maybe he's giving an example. I don't know.
So you're saying
So they're not all equal. Like all foundational principles are not equal, even though they might be equally foundational. Right.
So what makes one kind of foundational tenet better than another one?
That's an excellent question. Iterability. Imagine that you play a game with someone and you're a kid, and it's fun. So then you play again and again and again.
So repetition.
It's playability across multiple iterations. So then you have.
Okay, you shot yourself in the foot, because religion or God, in the exact same way that is not replicable. You know. This is I think Ricky Gervais's example, but if there was a huge flood, everyone died, and you have new monkeys, blah blah, evolution again and again and again. What are the odds? Math would come back again, because 2 banana, 4 banana. That will come back. But what are the odds of another Jesus coming? I'm not saying another God. I'm not saying another belief system. What are the odds of another Jesus Christ coming on earth? Pause. What's the odds of Jesus Christ appearing on earth? Very low. So, by that definition, at least, religion or God isn't replicable in that sense. One-to-one examples, at least from where I'm standing, won't happen.
A friend, and a friend is better than having a game, right? So that's one. Breadth of application is another. So if it's just for me now, it's not as good as something that would be benefit to both of us across time.
Okay, how to define that? Maybe if it's extremely beneficial to me, but okay beneficial to everyone else, then from where I'm standing, my philosophy is better. And it'd be illogical for me to, I'm like Jordan Peterson. It'd be illogical for me to put some other philosophy at the foundation of my beliefs, even though there's another one who benefits me more. But that already has a preposition that my biggest foundational goal would be that I want to make myself good, or I want to live a good life. I guess the first actual core definition is that you want to follow your definitions. That's the core argument. Conscientiousness, I guess. I don't know. I have been recording for 1 hour already. Do I stop it now? Yes. I don't know, maybe I'll do a part 2, maybe I won't. Let's see if YouTube fucking blacklists this video. But either way, I'll see you in the next one. Love you all. Sleep well. Have a good day. Bye.